Imagine you live on a beautiful lake in Montana. Your sister's never been to your place and she wants to visit, but it's so far out in the boonies that can't be found on maps. Your sister can only get so far, so at some point you'll be required to give her specific directions to your lake house. You'll need to use descriptions, and you'll have to make sure that she knows about the curving roads and speed precautions. In this situation, you need adjectives and adverbs to describe these things. These two parts of speech are used to add detail and description to a sentence. In this lesson, you'll learn about the forms and functions of adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives are used to describe nouns or pronouns. They answer the following questions: which one, what kind, how many, how much, and whose. To determine if a word is an adjective, find any words that seem to be describing or modifying nouns or pronouns and ask yourself those questions. Consider the following example. Henry received a heartfelt card from his mother thanking him for the 2 dozen flowers. What kind of card did Henry receive? A heartfelt card. How many flowers did he send? 2 dozen. Here's another to consider. Some of the job was done on Friday. In this one, what question is answered? Yep, how much? And the answer, of course, is the adjective that describes the noun job, which is some. And this is also a good example for showing that adjectives sometimes do not appear immediately before or after the noun or pronoun that they're modifying. Sometimes adjectives are used to compare two or more items. Take a look at these examples that show the different forms of the adjective delicious. This meal is delicious. This meal is more delicious than yesterday's meal. And this meal is the most delicious I've ever tasted. When you're comparing two items, add the word more before the word or the suffix er to the end of the word. These are called comparative adjectives. Here are two examples. I'm kinder than any of my siblings. The hotel survey found that this year's customers were more satisfied than last year's. When you're comparing more than two items, add the word most before the word, or the suffix est to the end of the word. These are called superlative adjectives. Here are two examples. Out of the 3 cross-country runners, Fernando is the fastest. Joshua Bell is one of the most talented violinists in the world. Comparisons using two or the most common adjectives, good and bad. They are the most common adjectives, good and bad. And they're formed in a slightly different way. Take a look at this table that shows the way that that's done. Good becomes better in the comparative and best in the superlative. Bad becomes worse in the comparative and worst in the superlative. While adjectives describe nouns and pronouns, adverbs describe verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. And they answer the following questions: when, where, why, how, and how often. The most common type of adverb describes a verb and usually ends in ly. The nurse walked slowly down the hallway. How did the nurse walk? Slowly. The tennis player angrily threw her racket. How did the tennis player throw her racket? Angrily. Not all adverbs, however, end in ly. I went to the grocery store yesterday. The groundhog looked down and saw its shadow. You may put your assignment here. In the first example, that adverb yesterday answers when. In the second sentence, the adverb down answers the question where. And in our last one, the adverb here also answers the question where. In addition to describing verbs, adverbs can also describe adjectives and other adverbs. Here's an example. The new book by Terry Smith looked really interesting. This sentence uses the adjective interesting to describe the book by Terry Smith. How interesting did it look? Really interesting. The word really in this sentence is an adverb describing the adjective interesting. The following example sentences use adverbs to describe adjectives and other adverbs. The first two describe adjectives, and the last two describe other adverbs. Just like adjectives, adverbs can be used to make comparisons as well. Comparative adverbs use the word more or the suffix er to compare two actions. The drunk driver drove more dangerously than ever before. To make the varsity team, Carol had to train harder than last year. When comparing more than two actions, add the word most or the suffix est to form a superlative adverb, and that again is for when you're comparing more than two. The administrative assistant was considered by her manager to be the most diligent employee. Out of all 50 people at the open house, the Coopers stayed the longest. Comparisons using the adverbs well or badly are formed in a slightly different way, as is shown on this table. In this lesson, we discussed the forms and functions of adjectives and adverbs. Thanks for listening.